You know, when you're watching a movie, oftentimes when you miss the first part, then it's hard to understand what's going on in the movie. What we're going to talk about today is important for everybody to understand that they need to get the first part, because you may think that we're talking about one thing when in fact we're talking about the other. So we're going to talk about caregiving and caregivers. Oftentimes people think about people who receive the care, but do not pay a lot of attention or don't have a lot of knowledge about the impact of giving care on the person who's giving care. So we're going to talk some about caregiving and caregivers, but it's important to understand the difference between those who are receiving the care and those who are giving the care. Strangely enough, one who gives care is greatly impacted by the giving of that care. Sometimes we overlook the fact that there are literally millions of people who need care. Well, if they need care and they are receiving care, then somebody is giving that care. So research shows that if a person is a caregiver, then there are many social, psychological, physical, and economic factors that would come into that person's life. So we're happy today to be able to place some emphasis on caregivers. This is a call to action.
A call to action.
And I'm your host, Alex Habersham, and I'm so happy today. I'm humbled to be able to present a subject and a topic and to expose a scenario in the community that is often overlooked. A lot of people don't think about it, but Rosalind Carter, has created an institute in Americas, and the Rosalind Carter Institute for Caregiving. And she says there are 4 categories that people can look at: those who have been caregivers, those who are caregivers, and those who will be caregivers, and finally, those who need caregiving. And she says that everybody in the world will fit into that category. So we have 2 experts today with us on caregiving in the person of Miss Lisa Rickman and Miss Mary Whitfield, who work closely with an organization about caregiving. So introduce yourselves just personally first, and then we'll get into what you all are doing at this important event that we have coming up. Lisa, you first.
I'm Lisa Rickman. I am the coordinator for Middle Georgia CareNet this year. We're one of 12 CareNets in the state that collaborate with Rosalind Carter Institute. I tell people that I'm civilian. I'm not associated with another organization. I was in banking for 24 years. But I have been caregiving for several years.
Wow.
I have a son with a disability, and I have several members of my family that were had dementia. So I know firsthand about caregivers, and my mother was a caregiver. So I know about the issues that are facing them.
Okay. I'm Mary Whitfield. I'm the director of Manor of Hope Resource Center, and we are collaborative with the Middle Georgia CareNet. In fact, I was there the day it was created, and was glad to be part of an effort in the community where people recognized that caregivers needed help. They needed resources. They needed someone to understand where they are and some of the places that they would go. And so over these years, I have been exposed to both professional caregivers, really more than 2 categories: the professional caregivers, the family caregivers, the volunteer caregivers, and then the paraprofessional caregivers. And we have embraced all of them in our efforts to educate the community about caregiving.
And I want us to be fully aware now of what we're talking about, because it's too often, as I said, overlooked. That there are just a whole lot of people who are caregivers. There are a lot of people that need caregiving, but somebody has to give the care. And what we want to emphasize today is, and you all can help me do this, is the fact that if one is a caregiver, like Ms. Rickman was, then that has an effect. You know, it has two effects. One, it has an economic effect on the community, because if, in fact, what happens when one is given care, then that keeps that individual out of an institution, because that person has to be taken care of. Well, by the same token, the giver of the care, then that person who's giving the care faces certain psychological, mental, physical, and other kind of challenges also. But why don't you address, just talk about that for a minute.
Learning firsthand from my mother. My grandmother had dementia, and she moved into our home when I was 13. She moved into my bedroom. So it was definitely a stress on the family. But I watched my mother withdraw from things that she enjoyed in order to take care of my grandmother and be there for her. Back then, there was not the facilities that you have now. There was not the focus on the caregiver. It was just the thing that you did. And there was little understanding of dementia at that time either. It was senility or hardening on the arteries. And so she withdrew from church. She did not go to church and Sunday school like she had. And she enjoyed the caregiving part. It did upset her that her mother was no longer the person that she thought so much of. Her memory was gone. But I think about that now when I think of other caregivers, and I think about that with myself, to try to balance my life and with the person I'm caring for, as well as my family, to not forget them, and like I said, to have balance.
What I am so happy about, in 2013, there are many agencies, even on the national level, who finally embraced this idea that caregivers need help. AARP is doing a tremendous job, the Rosalind Carter Institute, and there was just a conference just last weekend. National personalities and experts come down each year to talk about the latest research and the latest efforts that are being carried out to improve the lives of the caregiver. And of course, Rosalind Carter talks about her initiation into caregiving that prompted her to start an agency, because people need resources. They need information. A lot of times caregivers feel isolated. They feel as if they're the only ones going through this. And with efforts such as the Middle Georgia CareNet and others, they learn there are others going through it too.
That's outstanding. And the statistics are pretty much staggering. There are about, I think the figure is at 6 million now people in the United States who either caregivers or need care, one of them. And then it's going to increase to 12 million. It's going to increase to 12 million by 2030. So this is really, and Miss Mary, I've seen people in our church. Yes. I've seen people who give care, because you got that love factor involved in caregiving. So you've got that emotional tie-in to the point, and you all can address this, that oftentimes the caregiver neglects him or herself. Oftentimes the caregiver doesn't realize the impact, like you observed your mother, that this has on the person giving care. And I know I'm saying it too much, but I really, really want the audience to understand that caregiving is a scenario or a situation that's really important and that can really impact and affect and influence the person who's giving the care. Either of you got any thoughts on that?
Well, it has been shown over and over again that often the caregiver would end up either seriously ill or actually dying because they are so overburdened. Not that they don't want to do it, but they are just worn out with making the doctor's appointments, going to the appointments, making sure that the person who's being cared for has everything that he or she needs. And often, as you said, they neglect themselves. Heard sad stories of women who didn't get mammograms because they were taking care of someone or someone with a child that needed to be constantly supervised. They had no outlets, and therefore their personalities actually changed because they didn't have anything to give them creativity or an outlet. And so it is crucial that caregivers are embraced and encouraged.
Now, I'm going to hasten to say that since everybody fits in one of those categories, used to be a caregiver, need caregiving, will need caregiving, or gonna need caregiving, or are caregiving, then I want the consuming public, if you please, to be more conscientious of the fact that those people who are caregivers, it's pretty hectic, pretty taxing, and it really influences and affects the caregiver. So and then oftentimes, Miss Lisa, I think that if in fact we've got a family member, a friend, or a church member who that we see is a caregiver, then maybe we ought to try to offer. We're going to talk about the other resources in a minute, but I think we can give some personal. I mean, I notice at the church when the person comes in that needs the care, everybody runs to try to help because they're bringing the associated person to church, and that's important. And I want everybody to realize that those persons who are giving that care, are very, very committed to giving the care, but by the same token, it's very, very taxing. So let's talk. One of my pet peeves is the utilization of resources. There's help on the horizon and down at the river. So let's talk, and you can start, Miss Lisa, then we'll just kind of sashay into the event. But let's talk about the kind of resources, other than just personal resources, that could be available, like the CareNets, etc., to people who give care.
Senator Elizabeth Dole, former Senator Dole, was at the summit, and one of the things that she mentioned is that caregivers, actually family caregivers, save money because they're taking on that responsibility and most of the time are unpaid. But the VA is working towards a caregiver stipend, and that will be discussed at our care fair in November. And then we have different agencies, depending on the problem. Of course, there are all kinds of caregivers. There are caregivers of acute illness, so you're talking about cancer, American Cancer Society, and there are caregivers of the disabled or people that have brain injury or, like I said earlier, dementia. So you have Alzheimer's Association, you have Macon ARC, several different agencies, both profit and non-profit agencies. But I feel personally that a person who is caring for someone that is chronically ill is in much more danger of delaying their needs. Reverend Shannon Bell with Evercare Hospice will be at our care fair, and she has a little speaker topic that she does. It's called "You May Be a Caregiver If." And one of the ones that struck me is you may be a caregiver if you make your care recipients' doctor's appointments before your own. And I feel like that most caregivers are reluctant to ask for help, reluctant to think about that they are the ones, like you said earlier, that need help. And that's the reason for the care fair. That's how we get out information at one time and have several different resources that they can choose and do what we call vendor browsing and get pick up information from people to help them.
Well, Ms. Whitfield, talk a little bit more specifically about the care fair
Okay.
that she has mentioned,
Okay.
and what one can expect at this fair.
Okay, our care fair is Thursday, November the 14th. Registration is 8:30, but the registration must be done online through a website. Let me give the website. It is aarp.cvent.com/G capital GA CareForCaregiver, Georgia Caring for the caregivers, the end of that I was spelling, but we know that if it's not put in right, it will not go through. And if you have any questions, you can call Lisa at 781-5743. We'll have topics such as Social Security programs, medication management tips, AARP resources, legal issues, and that is a big one. And often the issues are so complicated, it needs to be done individually. So the thing about power of attorney and who can make decisions, that is something crucial that is often brought up, and we would have to refer them to some specialists in this area. Mental health resources, dementia care, veteran resources. We will have people there from the VA department, but developmental disabilities, and that is a big one because now a lot of children with disabilities are outliving their parents because of medical advances.
Right.
And so often there are some issues there that 20 years ago probably did not take place because the child died either as a child or a young adult, and that is not happening. Also, we're going to have some door prizes. And as Lisa said, the vendors will be there. And as we would say in church language, the den of thieves will be there to offer resources and information. So we are excited about this. Thursday, November the 14th, 8:30 to 2 p.m.
Yeah.
At Vineville United Methodist Church.
Vineville United Methodist.
And
And
the
of course,
Spiritual Life Center.
Yes.
and it's going to be a luncheon.
Luncheon, and the cost is $3.
That's $3.
Just $3.
Now, who's invited?
Lisa?
Well, obviously, we focus on the family caregiver, but paraprofessional caregivers are welcome as well because of the tips that they may pick up in caring for their person. But anyone that is involved with caregiving, we have volunteer caregivers that work for hospice and other agencies. So anyone that is interested in caregiving, that is caregiving for someone, or sees a family caregiver that is not taking care of themselves and wants to help, then they can gather information there.
Now, we're going to stick a pin in that because I think it's important. What you said is just important because oftentimes, excuse me for interrupting you, but I want to piggyback on that. Oftentimes, the caregiver, is so accustomed to doing it until they may be having a problem and not realize it because it just becomes a part of what they are doing. So what I think you're suggesting is that if you happen to observe someone who is a caregiver that you've noticed some problems, who may need some help, then one should recommend to that person, the caregiver, say, hey, they're having an affair, and it's called the Caring for the Caregiver fair at Vineville United Methodist Church on November the 14th. Why don't you, sometimes you just have to slow walk people
Yes. Yes.
into getting and into receiving help. So that is extremely important. And you know something, Miss Mary, I really, until there are several, I had the opportunity to become educated, through Myrtle working with Rosalind Carter. I didn't realize, and that's why I keep repeating that caregivers need help because frankly, out of these 40 years that I've lived, that took a minute. I got jokes. I lived without the knowledge of knowing the kind of impact that giving care had on people. Then I began to think, I know one of my ex-instructors at Bella Hudson had a child, disabled child, and I never knew, which means that either that instructor or his wife, had to be, it's 24/7, 365, and those of us who are fortunate enough, who are in a position, to try to help somebody, then, I think we should do that because it's our responsibility. Talk a little bit about the CareNet and then what the CareNet does.
Okay. The main focus of CareNet, and as Lisa said, there are 12 different CareNets across the state, is education, advocacy, and what's that last word, Lisa?
Validate care.
Validate.
Okay, say those three again now.
Educate, validate,
And advocate.
and advocate. And let me go to the validate part. At each care fair, we recognize some individuals who have been sacrificial in giving care to someone on a family level, paraprofessional level, or volunteer level. And we have 4 individuals this year who will be recognized at VIMA on November the 14th. And this happens all across the state. People are recognized for what they do, because you talked about the economic impact, how that influences the community. And a lot of these people actually sacrifice having a career in order to be caregivers. So the CareNets across the state are reaching out to individuals, giving them information, resources, care fairs, and when we go to the state meetings, it's just exciting to hear what's going on around the state. So it's not just happening here in Middle Georgia, but I do want to hurry make a plug, because men are less likely to attend events like this. And they are caregivers, but they don't like to call themselves caregivers. But the men need this information because they may be taking care of their wife, their child, their mother. The sandwich generation, where you have 3 generations living in the same household, and it may be somebody, a senior who has elder issues, or it may be a child that still needs additional supervision. So we are encouraging not just women, because they may come, but men tend to stay away, and they really do need this information as well as all the females.
What Ms. Mary is saying, that if you are a caregiver, then it behooves you, you're English teacher, but
Yes.
I guess I could use that word. It behooves you, to come to this caregiving event, caring for the caregiver. And this is a phenomenon that's gaining momentum and education and validation,
Yes.
throughout the country. A couple other things I want to mention. If, in fact, in the United States, all of these people who are receiving care, it will cost the country $460 billion a year. So these caregivers are playing an important economic role, in our community. Now, let me tell you something else. This may make us want to help somebody who's giving care. Millions of people, they say everybody, in their last 2 years of living, over 65, when they become 65 and over, then they're going to need 2 years of caregiving. So this is an important phenomenon. It's an important activity. I'm so humble and happy to be able to impart this information to the community. I'll give both of you a couple of minutes to make a parting statement.
I know it's difficult for the caregiver sometimes to get time away, but I think that you will gain resources, and like we said, you'll feel validated at the end of the day once you have been to our care fair. Again, November 14th, 8:30 to 2, in the Spiritual Life Center of Vineville Methodist Church. And we invite you to come, and we invite you, as you hear more about CareNet, to become a part of Middle Georgia CareNet. We are a group of volunteers.
Okay.
Okay, how can they become a part too, while you talking?
We have bi-monthly meetings. Again, Lisa is the coordinator, and she is the contact person. That number again is 781-5743. Alex, the thing I would like to put a pin in just before we leave is that we want people to come to the care fair, but just in case you can't, find some resource, find some agency, reach out, ask for help. Don't do it alone. It is too much information, too many resources available to carry this by yourself. And if you don't know where to get it, just go in the telephone book in the yellow page and start calling social services, social agencies, and somebody should be able to tell you. And an excellent resource in this area and all across the state, AAA, Area Agency on Aging.
Okay.
Is an excellent resource for each community across the state. Ask, and help will be given.
We're so happy and to be able to do that. Let's name the agencies again that are going to be at this care fair, and one of you can just go ahead and do it.
I didn't bring my vendor list, but let's see if I can remember off the top of my head. We will have Wesley Glenn Ministries, John Wesley Villas, Disability Connections. I believe Star Choices will be there. Most of those are in the disability arena. John Wesley is a senior community. We hope to have Blair House there, and we will have Veterans Affairs will be there. They are a speaker as well as a vendor. We have different hospice agencies. Evercare Hospice is one of our members, very supportive. AARP will be there, have a table also. We will have Coliseum Northside as well as Coliseum HCA over on Coliseum Drive. We have Alice's Place. We have Community Horizons. We have Angels of Mercy. So we try to get a wide variety. Like I said, disabilities and dementia care, Alzheimer's Association will be there.
Wow.
So we find that those are all, and someone from Rosamond Carter Institute for Caregiving,
Wow.
Dr.
Wow.
Lisa Eason will be there,
Wow.
and they have many resources.
Wow. This is a call to action.
A call to action.
I'm your host, Alex Habersham, and I want you to really stick a pin in this. And I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to give out my number at my office for anybody in addition to Miss Lisa who needs some information. You can call the Black Pages office at 478-464-0074. And if need be, we can send you a link to this website. So you can just go ahead and click on that link to register for this most important event. So there are resources available out there. There's help available. And we all need it one way or the other. So if you are a caregiver and you don't need help right now, you still ought to go because you're going to need help before it's over. I'm so happy to have been able to interview Miss Lisa Rickman today and Miss Mary Whitfield, both who are associated with the event Caring for Caregivers, which is going to be at the Vineville United Methodist Church on November the 14th at what time?
8:30.
At 8:30 a.m. and they're going to serve lunch, and you can get you a $3 lunch and still learn a lot. This is a call to action.
A call to action.
I'm your host, Alex Habersham. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Très bien.